Okay, so let's talk a little bit about type classifications. And again, this is the same as we spoke about before on the anatomy of type. Day to day, you don't need to think too much about different classifications of type. When you choose your fonts, you're gonna have a few go-tos that you've picked up over the time that you quite like working with, so you'll probably go for those a lot. But you'll be eyeballing stuff you'll be looking at fonts thinking whether that feels right for the job. You're not going to be thinking so much, oh, is that an old style or a modern font? It's not something you need to worry about too much. But it's always good to have the knowledge, and if you start to fall in love with design, like I said before, you're going to want to get deeper into typography and learn everything about it. So this is a little intro to it, and then you can go off and learn tons of it yourself. Okay, so what are the classes? Well, there's two main classes, serif and sans-serif. And what are the differences? Well, serifs are the fonts or a serif font is the fonts with the decorations on the edge, sorry. So you can see here in blue highlighted, these are the serifs, the decorations at the edges of the font. And they actually do have a function apart from looking cool. They were invented by the Romans, and the actual function is when we read words, we don't actually read the individual characters. So we don't read the serifs in serif when we're reading. We're actually recognizing the shapes of the characters, and we don't read them as letters, we read the shape of the word. So we recognize the word serif as a shape, and that's how we read. So the idea of the serif was it helped to connect the shapes more fluidly. So it helped with reading. And that is the idea of a serif. So they look good, but they actually have a function as well. The serif fonts are things like Georgia, Times New Roman, Baskerville and Platino. Pretty much anything with the little decorations at the edges of the character. So a sans-serif, sans in French means without. So sans-serif means without serif. And that's fonts like Arial, Helvetica, Frutiga, Gill Sans. And these are seen as very modern style fonts. They're clean and functional and easy to read. And they're things that you see the big Swiss typography posters use a lot of sans-serif fonts. And you can see here it's got no decoration on the edge. It's just cut off, nice and clean, nice and straight. And I prefer to use these day to day. I like sans-serif fonts. I feel that they're cleaner and I like working with them. But everyone's got their own preference for fonts. Anyway, so that's serif and sans-serif, and that's pretty much the main thing you'll be thinking about when you're doing your designs. The first thing you'll be thinking, do I need a sans-serif font or a serif font for this job? And then you'll start thinking about the character once you've decided. But serif fonts, this is more modern, this is more seen as more elegant and a bit more old-fashioned. So the different classes then. So here's 6 different classes, but there's absolutely loads. Here you've got old style, transitional, modern, slab, grotesque and humanist. But there's also display and script and monotype and a bunch of others. But you can read into those a little bit more for yourself. But they all have a different sort of character or style to them. So I'll just run through these for you. But just a quick thing, display, that's normally things like decorative typefaces. So you'd use them normally for title. You wouldn't use a display font for body text, more for short title or just a single or couple of words. And you've got script, which is like a handwritten font. Again, in general, you wouldn't use it for large pieces of text. It's more sort of for titles because they're not the easiest things to read. Anyway, that's just a quick going on about that. So, old style fonts. Old style fonts, they were created in the 15th century and they've got a low contrast between the thick and thin strokes of the font. So you can see here, there's a slight contrast, but not too much between that there and that there. Zoom in a bit. So it's pretty similar, the width of the font all the way through. There is a slight contrast, but not a massive amount. I'd say a medium amount of contrast. And they're fonts like Carlson, Sabon and Bembo. This is coaching. if that's how you say it, or Kuchin. I don't know how to. No one ever told me the exact way to say it, but it's Kochin or Kuchin. I don't know. Anyway, and these are very old looking fonts. You can imagine this on like a treasure map or Lord of the Rings type fonts. I don't think you'd use this for a skateboard website or something like that. These are more for old fashioned, old styly looking things. Could look cool on a pub website or on a billboard for a pub or something. I don't know. But yeah, don't use it on your modern websites, or don't use it for Bitcoin or something. Probably won't work too well. So the next one, transitional. So transitional, this is kind of the middle ground between the old style and the next one, which is modern. And traditional, these have got sharper, flatter serifs, and they've also got longer ascenders and descenders. And remember, ascenders are the part of the text going above the X height, and descenders, which there isn't any here, but I just give it a little Y, so it's fonty. Like, here you go. The descenders are the part going below the baseline. Anyway, so these are things like Baskerville, Bulmer and Georgia. And you can see that the serifs on these are pretty flat. Whereas here, you've got diagonal serifs and pretty sharp. The serifs on these are pretty flat. Still pointy, going to a point like there. But they're more flat. Bang. The next one. This is a modern font. And I really like these. This is things like Didot, Bodoni, Playfair, Caledonia, and these are super beautiful, elegant fonts. And you can see here the difference on these to the other two, as these have got a real high contrast on strokes. So you've got really thin strokes there next to a really thick. So they're a real high contrast font. And they're really elegant and really lovely. And I like to use these for titles though. These really don't work very well as body font because of the contrast. The strokes are so thin that when you get too small, it's really difficult to read. So you wouldn't use this for body copy, but you could do some nice headings and titles with these. That's what I use them for. So these are really lovely fonts, but they're not good for body fonts. But very, very elegant, very classy as well. Work great in fashion, but also work great in banks or whatever you like. Really lovely. So the next one is Slab Serif. So these fonts here, you can see pretty much Slab Serif. Why it's called a Slab Serif, because the serif on these, it's more like a block. Very thick serif. And the thing this font about this category of typeface is there's a really low contrast between strokes. So you can see pretty much it's almost the same all the way through. Very, very slight variation in width on some bits, but literally low contrast fonts. And these are great for advertising or hard working looking sort of websites, because they work really well at a distance, up close, very easy to read. But subconsciously they're seen as hard working fonts. So Slab Serif for you there. Very cool fonts, and they're things like Rockwell, Memphis, Typewriter, Courier, things like that. Next one is Grotesque. I prefer Grotesque over all the other fonts myself. And these are things like Helvetica, Geneva, Source Sans Pro. Any sort of Swiss style design use Grotesque fonts. And I love Swiss design, so that's why I like these fonts. And they're clean, functional, straight lines, and very modern. And they're often used in big posters, or well, often used anywhere. They're in fact on the Google and iOS, they use San Francisco and Roboto, which are Grotesque fonts. Very clean, very functional, great for reading at any size really. Finally, Humanist. So Humanist, these are pretty much the same as the old style fonts without the serif on the end. So they're good for reading, and they're things like Gil Sans, Myriad, Optima. And you can see they look very similar, but they've just chopped off the serifs. So meant to be easy for reading, and similar to the old style fonts. Anyway, so that is the all pretty much you need to know about the categories or type classifications. But get into it deeper, because there's a lot more different types, monospacing, things like that, and it can be interesting to have a good look through. You won't need it day to day, but it's something to think about and something to learn to widen your knowledge of typography. Right, on to the next bit.